I always feel that when it comes to kids, the fear just gets amplified. And that's exactly what's in that first story, where a little girl had to deal with a situation that makes your blood run cold just hearing it.
This isn't easy for me to write, but I feel like it's time. When I was little, like just 8 years old, things were way different. We lived in this small, cute neighborhood in Boston, exactly like the kind you see in movies. My name is Jennifer, but everyone just calls me Jen. My parents worked a lot. Mom, Deborah, was a nurse, and Dad, Robert, was a mechanic. So all day, especially during summer break, I was pretty much on my own. Our neighbor, Mr. Paul Taylor, was an older guy, maybe in his 60s, white hair, always smiling. He was kind of like the grandpa I never had. His wife, Mrs. Taylor, was sick and mostly stayed in a room. Mr. Taylor's house was right next to ours. He'd call me over a lot. "Jen, come on over. Play a video game with me." Or, "Hey, come see the new tomatoes that grew in the garden." To me, it was just normal. He'd give me chips or candy, and I'd hang out in his cool basement watching cartoons for hours. My mom knew I was there. She'd always say, "Jen, stay at Mr. Taylor's house. Don't wander off." She thought I was safe. Mr. Taylor would tell me stories and run his hand through my hair. I remember one afternoon, maybe around 4 p.m., when he took me into his TV room. He had me sit next to him on the sofa. The room had this faint, weird smell like old wood and tobacco. He was telling me a story about a brave little girl, and I was looking up at him, listening. Then he suddenly picked me up and put me on his lap. It felt a little weird, like I was too big to be sitting on someone's lap like that. He put his hand on my shoulder and started tracing my arm with his fingers. He kept urging me to come closer to him, right up close. His face was really near mine, and I could feel the heat of his breath. I didn't really get why it was happening, but I wasn't super comfortable. I tried a little bit to slide off his lap, but he just held me a bit tighter. He was smiling, but his eyes, they weren't matching the smile. He was waiting for something. I knew it. For a split second, I felt this fear, a kind of baseless dread. The very next second, the door opened. I saw my mom standing there. She'd come home early from work, probably closer to 5 p.m. Mom tapped lightly on the door and then just walked in, not waiting for an answer. She saw us, me in his lap, and his hand on my arm. The color completely drained from Mom's face. I remember she just froze, her mouth hanging open like her voice was stuck in her throat. She didn't scream or make a sound. It was this terrifying, quiet moment. Mr. Taylor immediately scrambled and let me off his lap. I stood on the floor. Mom took one step back and just said one word. "Jen, outside, now." Her voice was so low it was almost a whisper, but it had this intensity that made me bolt out the door immediately. Mr. Taylor didn't move. His face looked totally fallen too, but he didn't say anything to Mom. I stood in the front lawn wondering what just happened. A few minutes later, Mom came out. Her eyes were puffy like she had been crying. She grabbed my hand tight and we went home. That night, the house was strangely silent. Dad came home late, and after Mom told him everything, they talked in low voices for a really long time. 2 days later, the house started getting packed up. I asked Mom, "Where are we going?" Mom bent down and hugged me so tightly and said, "We're moving to a new city, a new house, where we'll be happier." She never mentioned Mr. Taylor or that day again. We left that house. I never saw Mr. Taylor again. The whole incident became this hazy, weird memory in my head. I always remembered sitting on his lap and Mom's reaction, but I didn't know why it was such a big deal. Now I'm 22. Last year, I accidentally saw a news article about my old neighborhood. It was about Mr. Paul Taylor. He had passed away, but the article mentioned something awful. It cited testimony from several other neighbors' kids that he was a sexual predator. That article unlocked a horrific truth inside me. That's when I finally knew what he was about to do that 4 p.m. afternoon, and the sacrifice my mom made to save us. That was the last day of my innocence. I finally get that the weird silence and the rush to leave were actually Deborah's fight to protect me. Those candies Mr. Taylor gave me weren't just candy. They were the start of something terrifying. That fear I felt at 8 years old was completely real. I was lucky my mom saw me in time. Otherwise, my story could have been completely different.
If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Also, let me know in the comments how you found the video. Now, let's move on to the next story.
My name is Austin Reed. I'm 30, and I used to live on the second floor of an old wood frame apartment building in Washington, D.C. I liked the place because it was cheap and close to work, but I quickly learned that cheap comes with a price. The guy above me was a middle-aged man named Mr. Williams. He was a loner, and his apartment was constantly full of these bizarre, erratic noises. They weren't typical neighbor sounds like loud music or shouting. They were way more aggressive. At first, the noise would start around 9 p.m. It would be loud scraping sounds on the wood floor, like someone dragging heavy furniture. Then came the banging of metal. It sounded like he was trying to break the wooden frame of the building. I tried going upstairs and knocking once or twice, but he never opened the door. One night, it was about 11:30 p.m. when the noise got completely terrifying. It was a sustained, irregular on the floor. It sounded like someone was repeatedly dropping something and then angrily kicking it. There was no laughter or shouting, just the noise itself. When it wouldn't stop, I started recording it on my phone and finally called the landlord, Mr. James. Mr. James called me back the next day. "Austin, I went up there. He wouldn't open the door, but I saw his feet under the door. He seemed fine. I think he's just a little old and lonely." That made me angry, but also scared. If he was fine, then what the hell was he doing? The noise didn't stop, but the pattern changed over time. Now it would start in the afternoon, especially after I started working from home. It was less about hitting things and more of a constant, choked, gasping or coughing sound. It sounded like someone struggling because something was lodged in their throat. This sound was coming directly above my head. One afternoon around 2 p.m., one of his gasps was so sudden and horrifying that I jumped out of my chair. It was like a severe, sudden choking fit, and then complete silence. No dragging, no coughing, nothing. That silence was way more unnerving than the noise had been. I sat there for hours, waiting for the next sound, but it stayed quiet. I decided I had to see for myself. I went up the stairs, my heart pounding. I knocked gently on his door. No answer. I knocked a little louder and called out his name. Still complete silence. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing inside. No movement, no sound. I was convinced something was wrong. He'd either collapsed or died. I should have called the police, But suddenly, a low, raspy voice came right next to the door, like sand grating on a stone. It said one word: "Go." I bolted down the stairs in terror. I was now convinced he was doing this on purpose. He wanted to show me he was in control, keeping me on the floor below, at his mercy. The noise wasn't just an annoyance anymore. It was a psychological war he was waging against my silence. The noise never completely stopped. Even today, I still wake up at 7 a.m. and hear the soft of the same thing being hit repeatedly on the floor. I've moved 3 times since then, but every time I look at a new apartment, the first thing I check is whether anyone lives above me. I've learned that the noise or the commotion isn't the problem. The problem is the person hidden behind the curtain, terrorizing your soul with just sounds. And the most disturbing thing is that I never found out what he was doing. What was he dragging? What was he hitting? Or why was he choking? That uncertainty, that hanging sword, still poisons the silence of every new home I find.
This story happened to me last year. I had just moved from New York to a small townhouse in Portland, Oregon. My name is Ethan Miller, and I work for a software company. It was supposed to be a fresh start, and I thought this quiet, green neighborhood would bring me some peace. My next-door neighbor, in the unit right next to mine, was Mr. Thomas Harrison. He was probably in his 60s, always neatly dressed, with well-groomed white hair. He was a widower and seemed very polite. When I first moved in, he brought me a plate of cookies and said, "Young man, let me know if you need anything." At first, he was just a nice neighbor. He'd help me wheel out my trash cans or bring in my mail when I got back late from work. "I saw your car lights, so I knew you were back," he told me one night around 11 p.m. I just thought, good guy. But then things started getting weird. One day I was on the phone with my friend Chloe, telling her I was going camping the following week. Half an hour later, Mr. Harrison knocked on my door. He handed me some seasonal allergy pills and said, "The weather changes suddenly in the mountains. Keep these with you." I stopped and looked at him. "Mr. Harrison, how did you know I was going camping?" He didn't seem embarrassed at all. He just smiled gently. "I was in my garden. I heard you talking on the phone. Your window was open." But I distinctly remembered closing my window. That was the moment I felt the first cold wave of fear in my gut. Over the next few weeks, his behavior became genuinely frightening. He knew my routine better than I did. "Ethan, you had coffee at 3 p.m. today. That wasn't your favorite blend." Or, "You worked on that project until 1 a.m. last night. You need to get some rest." When I washed my car, he commented on why I used the specific washing soap he'd suggested I buy a month ago. My bedroom window and his living room window were really close, though there were some bushes between them. It felt like he was watching all the time. One evening, I realized I always felt his presence when I was inside. I felt like he was watching me through the walls of my house. I deliberately turned on my light at 8 p.m. and then immediately pulled back my bedroom curtain. Mr. Harrison was sitting on his sofa, looking straight into my window from his side. He wasn't smiling. He was just staring at me. When he saw that I'd spotted him, he slowly raised his hand and waved at me, like you'd wave to a small child. That moment disturbed me so much, my heart started racing. It wasn't a jump scare. It was a silent, deep terror. He was a human being, and he was intentionally instilling this fear in me. I decided I was going to report him to the police the next day and break my lease. At 7:30 a.m., as I was walking to my car, he suddenly walked out of his garage. He called out to me in a cold, unexpected tone. "You are going nowhere, Ethan," he asked. His voice didn't have that grandfatherly softness anymore. It had a threat in it, a sense of control. "You are trying to run away." The blood froze in my veins. I said, "I'm going to work." He stood between me and the car door. "This place is good for you. I look out for you. Without me, this city will be too hard for you." He tilted his head slightly, and there was a glint in his eyes that was extremely dangerous. It was a clear, unspoken message. "You belong to me. If you try to leave, I will ruin you." I realized arguing was pointless. I pretended I'd forgotten something inside and ran back into the house quickly. I locked the door, chained it, and stood leaning against the wall for half an hour, my breathing rapid. The fear wasn't of a ghost. It was the fear that a person could intrude so deeply into your life that your own home becomes a cage. I didn't go to work that day. I packed my car and left 2 hours later. I never reported it to the police because I was afraid he'd find out and come after me. Even today, when I pull back the curtain in my new apartment, I immediately dread the thought, is Mr. Thomas Harrison looking at me from his window at this very moment? That's the fear that will always stay with me. Quiet, human, and utterly real.
My name is Ava Martin, and for the last 2 years, I was living in a small rental in California. It was a duplex, a set of 2 connected houses, and my neighbor lived right next door to me. I'm a freelance writer, so I spent most of my time inside. My neighbor, whose name was Jeremy Finch, was probably in his 40s. He looked like a normal guy, a little lanky, and he worked for a private security company. Initially, I just ignored him. We'd maybe exchange a nod or a quick hello. But pretty soon, I started getting the feeling he wasn't just a neighbor. The first strange thing happened when I noticed a scratch on my car. The next evening, Jeremy knocked on my door and apologized. "I accidentally backed into your car this morning on my way to work at 7:15 a.m. He said it so casually, like he was giving me the weather report. I was stunned he hadn't told me right away, and that he knew exactly when I'd gone outside with that level of detail. Over the next few weeks, he started commenting on my daily habits. I was sitting in my TV room drinking coffee when a text came from him. "You don't seem to like that brand of coffee. Maybe you should switch to the other one." I only had his number for emergencies. I immediately pulled back the curtains and looked toward his house. His window was closed, but I thought I saw a slight movement. I tried to ignore him, but his next move was much more direct. I kept a small plant on my kitchen windowsill. One day, I saw the plant was half broken, and there was a tiny note stuck to it with just 2 words. "Watching you." It was just a small piece of paper, and the printing was so faint I almost tossed it as trash, but a chill ran through my body. I was certain he had been inside my house, maybe just moments after I left, but my door was locked. I checked everything, no open windows, no signs of forced entry. but now I suspected he either had a key to my door or had installed a camera. My peace of mind was completely gone. The fear peaked one night when I woke up around 1:30 a.m. My bedroom window was halfway open. I'd forgotten to close it. As I went to shut it, I saw a faint glow reflecting in the glass from outside. It wasn't a security camera. It was the glow of Jeremy's cigarette. He was standing silently right behind my house, near our shared fence. He wasn't looking directly at my window, but he was just there, smoking, and I could feel his presence. His being there told me he knew I was sleeping, or now that I was awake. I quietly closed the window and locked it from the inside. I went back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. He was inside my head now, controlling my every move, my sleeping and waking hours. I thought about calling the police as a renter, but what would I say? My neighbor smokes behind his house and he texted me that my coffee is bad? A few days later, I was working on my computer and opened my laptop. My computer wallpaper was a picture I'd taken on the beach the previous week, a photo I hadn't sent to anyone. Now my wallpaper was different. It was a close-up picture of my broken plant, exactly as it had looked with the note attached. Now I wasn't afraid he'd steal from me or hurt me. I was afraid he was going to drive me crazy. Without even breaking into my house, he had breached both my digital and real life, proving he had total control over me. I packed all my belongings into a small van at 6 p.m. and drove away. I didn't care about the rent. I didn't give notice. I just wanted to escape. As I drove off, I looked in my rearview mirror one last time. Jeremy Finch was standing at his doorway holding a coffee cup, and he was staring straight at my car. He didn't wave or make a move. He was just silently smiling. That quiet smile still terrifies me today. It was proof that he knew I was leaving, and he also knew he wasn't losing me, but that he could control me even from a distance. That fear is still with me.